So continuing on with our lecture on strategic operating and marketing plan, let's get into the marketing plan. So the marketing plan really starts with an executive summary. It talks about what is the plan going to be. And then again, we go into a situation analysis. The situation analysis talks about both our internal and external strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. That's when people get into the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And then our marketing goals and objectives. And remember, our goal is what we want to be, and our objective is what we want to achieve. Then our marketing strategy, which is how we're going to achieve that. Our marketing implementation, which other people will call tactics, or our tactical implementation. And then also evaluation and control. As you guys work through your Constellation Brands case study, a lot of these things will be very evident as you dissect Constellation Brands and why they're so successful. So pay particular attention to this particular section on the marketing plan structure. All right, so the marketing plan considerations. It's got to be comprehensive. We can't just talk about one product. We've got to talk about all of our different products, even those ancillary products that make our best product even better. We also need to talk about the entire marketing mix, the 4 Ps of marketing. What products are we going to offer? At what price points? Are we going to be a high-end price point? Are we going to be a low-cost provider? Are we going to meet the competition? Are we going to do a price skimming strategy? We're going to get into all that when we talk about pricing later. It's got to be flexible. The marketing plan has to be flexible because we are not in a stagnant or in a environment that doesn't change. We're in a very dynamic environment, so it's got to be flexible. And then consistent, not only through one product, but all products, and not only through one customer, but all customers. We have to have a consistent philosophy, and it also has to be logical, especially when we're looking at our objectives. We can't automatically think that this year we did $1 million, next year we're going to double in sales. Generally speaking, that doesn't happen. So it's got to be logical. We've got to make sure that we have a logical plan, and we've got to make sure that we have an achievable plan. That's where that SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, or actionable, relevant, and time-bound comes into. So the executive summary really outlines the key points of the plan and the execution. And most of the time, those key points are an overview of the marketing mix and the target market. Remember, with marketing, there's 5 things that we really need to understand. 1, our target market. Everything in marketing starts with who are we going to do what to. And then the other 4 Ps of the marketing mix. So basically, it's a concise overview of the plan, including those 4 Ps. And then you dive down and you do a deeper dive as you get into the structure of the plan. The executive summary is not a deep dive yet. It goes into a deep dive later. The plan does, but the executive summary is really an overview, just as it sounds. When you're presenting to an executive, you're going to tell him or her what you're going to do and how you're going to do it very concisely. All right, then we get into really some of the nits and grits. 2 of my favorite models is the SWOT analysis and the BCG analysis. The SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Your strengths, what is your competitive advantage? Your weaknesses, where are you vulnerable, especially to your competition? What are your opportunities? And your opportunities are really going to be where your growth is coming from. Is it going to come from new markets? Is it going to come from new products? Is it going to come from a combination of that? Is it going to come from going global if you're a domestic firm? And then your threats are, generally speaking, those threats that could derail your business. The threats could be economic. We could go into a recession. We could have a pandemic like we did over the last couple of years. Now remember, the threats also could be coming from your competition. You've got very low barriers to entry, so you've got competition coming in. Your strengths and weaknesses are internal. This is key, guys. And a lot of my students do this wrong, so make sure that you understand that. Your strengths and weaknesses are internal to your organization. Your organizational strengths and your organizational weaknesses. Your opportunities and threats are external to your organization. So a threat can't be that you'll have a layoff. A threat can't be that a plant will close down, because that's internal. That might be weaknesses, but it's not a threat. A threat comes from external, which would be your competition, economic environment, social environment, political environment, lawsuits. Those types of things are all the threats external to your environment. The next thing that I really like is BCG analysis. Now, the BCG analysis, I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over this. This is product related. The BCG analysis are specific to the products in which you offer. In the top, you've got relative market share, and on the side, you've got market growth. If you've got strong market share and the market is growing very strongly, for instance, streaming music, Spotify. The market for streaming music is growing considerably. People are not looking at radio anymore. And Spotify has a very strong market share. That would be a star. Or if you want to take Apple, for instance. All right. A star would be smartwatches. Smartwatches are growing considerably, and Apple has a very strong market share. So a smartwatch would be a star for them. A question mark would be Apple TV. Streaming services are growing, but Netflix and Hulu and Disney are all strong competitors. Apple TV is not a strong market share. They have relatively weak market share. So Apple TV might be a question mark. A cash cow for Apple would be a smartphone. A smartphone is not a star. The reason is they've got very, very strong market share. Domestically, they're about 40%. But the market is not growing anymore when it comes to smartphones. So because they have a very strong market share, their relative market share is very strong, but the market is not going, the iPhone would be a cash cow. And then a dog would be something that they have lower market share and the market is not growing. That would be iPods. Remember iPods? Nobody uses them anymore. So iPod would be a dog. So for Apple, a star would be their earbuds. I don't know what those things are called. I always call them earbuds, but Apple has something that they specifically call. A star would be their smartwatch. A star would be their automotive division, which is doing really a lot of good work with regards to self-driving vehicles, etc. A question mark would be Apple TV. Streaming services are growing, but they have a relatively small market share. Cash cow would be their iPhone. And then a dog would be their iPod. Remember, a BCG matrix is specific to products or services within the organization. It doesn't talk about divisions. It talks about products or services related to the organization. So again, marketing goals, broad, simple statements of what do you want to be. Marketing objectives have to have a number associated with them. And performance targets targeted to determine success. Really, that basically your marketing objectives is how you keep score. And it might be revenue growth. It might be market share growth. It might be number of new products being developed, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, your strategy. How are you going to achieve it? Identifying target markets, identifying new markets to grow, identifying new products in order to deliver that revenue stream, identifying new services to go along with those products, identifying different global opportunities out there. Don't just think domestically, think globally. What is our competitive advantage? How are we going to enhance that competitive advantage in order to drive revenue? So our strategy really is how we are going to achieve those objectives and how are we going to maintain that goal of what we want to be. Come on. And then marketing implementation would be your day-to-day tactical operation within that marketing implementation. And we talked about that. When these activities will be performed, how we're going to do it on the day-to-day, what projects are we going to start, what projects are we going to finish, what projects are we going to stop doing, how much were they going to be cost, what's the financial impact to this, both on a revenue stream and also on an operational cost. And then finally, evaluation and control is very important. A marketing plan is only as good as it's executed, and we've got to make sure that we're evaluating. Are we achieving those goals? If not, we need to do something else. Maybe we need to craft a different strategy. Do we have the money? Do we have the resources? Do we have the investors? Do we have the capital in which to do that? And then, is the plan living up to expectations? If we're going to achieve 20% market share, are we achieving that? Are we on plan? If we're not on plan, then in the middle of the executional or the middle of the operations, we've got to switch gears. And then finally, we have to have crisis management. I mean, who would have predicted that we were going to have a pandemic? So oftentimes we look at our external threats and we look at those types of things, a recession, a depression. Hopefully we won't have one of those, but a recession, maybe inflation or something like that. At that point in time, we've got to take a look at crisis management, and we've got to have a quick response to that. It's usually impossible to predict, and oftentimes our response is imperfect, but it's always a response. It's very likely to be disruptive, and developing a recovery plan would be key. And some of the examples would be recession of the 80s, the pandemic of the last couple of years, a natural disaster, a hurricane, the horrible disaster of the September 11th. All of those types of things would be part of what we would need to take a look at. And then finally, continuity planning. All right, we know what we're doing this year. Is it going to bring us into next year? Is it going to bring us into the year after? And that goes beyond just addressing a crisis that's happening right now, but it provides continuity through decision making and through stability within the decision making. The purpose of then the significance of the marketing plan, we've talked about that. Without a plan, you're shooting rubber bands at the moon, as I said in the introduction, and it really starts looking at a cyclical type of thing for your business. It's actionable, it promotes monitoring those actions and the results, and it promotes all of the things that we need to do as we're driving a marketing plan. It rolls downhill, and the marketing manager and the director of marketing or VP of marketing ultimately has responsibility. A good marketing plan, VP or something, she would make sure that the plan is communicated throughout the entire marketing organization as well as throughout the rest of the organization. Functional excellences, production, finance, human resources, etc., etc. All right, the last section is going to be very short, but it's time for me to sign off for this section. We'll be back in with the final video in just a minute.